This is a teleconferencing session on public relations and crisis management. This is for students of postgraduate of diploma and journalism and mass communication. Hi, I'm R. Prashant and I'm from the School of Journalism and New Media Studies. And today we have the pleasure and the company of Dr. Jayashree Jethwani, who is the course director of advertising and PR at Indian Institute of Mass Communication. Okay, so Dr. Jethwani, let's start.
Sure.
What is public relations all about?
Well, PR, Prashant, is the art and science of managing relationships between an organization and its various constituencies, stakeholders. Any organization would have internal publics, which would include employees, shareholders, families of employees, and the external would depend on what it produces. It can even be a service organization. It can even be political parties. No organization can survive without a positive public opinion supporting it. So public relations helps you build those bridges.
Okay, ma'am. So, would you elaborate on how public relations helps the company as well as the public?
Look, every company has a certain core competence. It produces. It has a certain core values, a certain core philosophy, and it has various target audiences. The target audience have certain communication needs.
Okay.
Similarly, an organization will have certain communication obligations. So it is a match between the obligation and the needs. So it's very important for any organization to get in touch with those target audience and tell them about the company per se, and also understand their communication needs and interface with them continuously.
Okay, I believe we have a video explaining the role of public relations in any organization.
It's not really a video explaining the role of PR. It's a video on crisis communication.
Okay.
Prashant, there was a time when there was no mass media. It was only interpersonal communication. But today, there has been huge media proliferation. The social media has turned the world absolutely flat. If you recall, we used to say there used to be an adage, you can befool all the people once or one person all the time. You can't befool all the people all the time. Today, the tables have turned. In fact, you cannot take even one single person for a ride, because if he is smart enough, he can turn the public opinion against that organization. The video which I'm going to play, in fact, I've copied it from the YouTube, which had millions of viewers, and the company, the United Airlines, was totally shocked, and they had to pay for the damages very heavily. So let's run the video.
Yes,
It's about 5 minutes. Enjoy the song also.
I flew United Airlines on my way to Nebraska. The plane departed Halifax, connecting in Chicago's O'Hare. While on the ground, a passenger said from the seat behind me, "My God, they're throwing guitars out there." The band and I exchanged a look, best described as terror, at the action on the tarmac, and knowing whose projectiles these would be. So before I left Chicago, I alerted 3 employees who showed complete indifference towards me. United, United, you broke my Taylor guitar. United, United, some big help you are. You broke it, you should fix it. You're liable, just admit it. I should have flown with someone else or gone by car. 'Cause United breaks guitars. When we landed in Nebraska, I confirmed what I'd suspected. My Taylor'd been the victim of a vicious act of malice at O'Hare. And so began a year-long saga of pass the buck, don't ask me, and I'm sorry, sir, your claim can go nowhere. So do all the airlines people, from New York to New Delhi, including kind Miss Earlwig, who says the final word from them is no. I've heard excuses, and I've chased your wild gooses, and this attitude of yours I say must go. United, you broke my Taylor guitar. United, some big help you are. You broke it, you should fix it. You're liable, just admit it. I should have flown with someone else or gone by car. 'Cause United breaks guitars. Well, I won't say that I'll never fly with you again, 'cause maybe to save the world I probably would, but that won't likely happen. And if it did, I wouldn't bring my luggage, 'cause you'd just go and break it into 1,000 pieces, just like you broke my heart. When United breaks guitars. United, you broke my Taylor guitar. United, some big help you are. You broke it, you should fix it. You're liable, just admit it. I should have flown with someone else or gone by car. 'Cause United breaks guitars. Yeah, United breaks guitars. Yeah, United breaks guitars.
Hope you understood the message.
Yeah, and obviously there's a deeply fascinating story behind this.
There's this gentleman called Dev Carroll, who is a rock star from Canada. So about a couple of years ago, he took a flight from Canada to Chicago and was flying by United Airlines. He checked in his guitar, and when he got down, he found it was broken. So as usual, when we break our luggage, we go to the customer, cell and ask them about payment, and they refuse. So this gentleman kept on fighting with United Airlines to pay him a few $1,000s, I think about $2,000, for about a year. And you saw the entire story animated in that. And when they did not budge, they said, "Oh, this is just a kind of a hazard, which we can't pay you anything." Now Dev knew only one thing, that's he was a singer. So he made this video and posted on YouTube. So video attracted millions of people, and everybody seemed to sympathize with him. And all of a sudden, United Airlines found that it had a crisis situation. It had an image problem. So they tried to find peace with him. And ultimately, the settlement was that United Airlines would pay millions of dollars to Dev Carroll's academy, which he runs for students in Canada, right? And also they said this is an extraordinary story in crisis communication, and we are going to use this video in our training programs. So just to reiterate my point, now we live in a world where we cannot take even one person for granted. PR generally does not create crisis, but if the companies, organizations are not sensitive to public demand, and sometimes public may be very irrational. It's not that public is always rational. They can be unreasonable, irrational, but then you have to bow down to the public opinion. I recall the Romans have coined a very interesting adage, says, "Vox populi, vox Dei." The voice of the people is the voice of God. So it was said, thousands of years ago, and how true even today. So the role of PR is to understand, the problems, understand the media around, understand the psyche of the publics involved, and help the companies, help the organizations bridge that gap.
Okay, in the given example,
Yes.
how did the public relation personnel or the people involved assuage the situation and conduct damage control?
Wonderful, good question. In fact, it's not possible to solve a problem just by communication. The intent is very important, understand the problem is very important, and taking decisions very important. In this case, United Airlines took a call. They knew there was a huge damage on their part, because of Def Carroll. So they agreed to pay him. They were not paying him $2,000, but they agreed to pay him millions of dollars to run his academy. So it's something called apology mortification in PR, that if you've done a wrong, so don't start, evading, avoiding, and say apologize and get away with the things. Maybe later I'm going to show you another video. It's very interesting. Here at least the company was directly involved. Sometimes, Prashant, what happens that you are doing your business as usual, but a lot of people are watching you. The people could be your customers.
You have all eyes on you all the time.
Yes, the people could be special interest groups, the CSO organizations, the NGOs. It could be the government. And one fine one, you find that you have a bad media. And then what do you do? In other words, public relations has to be eyes and ears for any organization. Number one, they look at trends, they map trends, they bring those trends to the management, sift them, advise management that this is the situation, and if we do not take an action, this could probably happen. So they work as the conscious keepers of the management. They sometimes work even as devil's advocate. So again, if you want, I can show the video right away.
Oh, please do.
You all have been, I'm sure, eating a lot of chocolates, and you know about the brand name Kit Kat. So let's watch the video, and I'll tell you what happened. And I think you can understand it. As you know, Kit Kat's mission statement is have a break, have a Kit Kat. It's a little uneasy for the eyes, but I would like you to watch it. Greenpeace is a very huge, large NGO which operates in most of the countries. And here Greenpeace brought out this video. It was splashed all over. Now the basic issue was that Kit Kat, like I'm sure many other companies, were using palm oil, which was imported from countries like Indonesia and Malaysia. And when you produce palm oil, so you destroy the rainforest. Just imagine, where are the connections? And then they had to apologize. They have stopped using palm oil. It's not that what is your direct action. It could even be somebody is watching you. You have to even take action on something you never realize in your life. So,
but the example does bring one thing to mind. As like in all professions involved with multinational corporations,
yes,
there has to be an ethical dilemma. So what sort of ethical dilemmas do PR professionals face, and what would be the standard protocol to go about it?
Good question. Continuously, in fact, why multinational corporations? Almost every company has a certain protocol in terms of the products they produce, in terms of the ethical standards, but more often you find the slip shows. And it's very important for the companies. PR cannot turn a black into white or black into grey. Let's face it. PR can only present the truth in a better manner. So PR is not a panacea to what all wrongs you are doing. So let us face it. Though PR sometimes criticized for manipulating the minds, for buying the media, getting right stories, but then that does not happen all the time. The companies have to be ethical in their work. The companies have to look at the public opinion and the publics. You've seen Coca-Cola and Pepsi have been the eye of the storm for very long for, taking away all the groundwater. I recall one of the, NGOs in USA. So they created so much of, public opinion against Coca-Cola in the USA that many universities in the USA stopped supplying Coca-Cola in the canteens. Because they created a kind of a story that all the groundwater in Kerala, in India, is being, pumped in by Coca-Cola, and people don't have water to drink and they are filling their bottles. So it created that kind of. But sometimes you find there could also be vested interests. So one has to be very careful, but that you can do nothing about it. In other words, public relations should continuously look at the environment, look at the issues, track issues in the media, track issues at various levels, and also continuously take evaluation and feedback, to the management to take a call on that.
Okay. On that note, PR doesn't. You cannot turn black into white.
Yes.
But PR is often accused of turning white into black. Now, how would you react to that?
White into black. What does that mean?
Means PR almost many a times advertises that things and policies, ideologies which are often pernicious, tend to yield greater benefits, like capitalism or like depleting rainforests, things like that. I mean, they come out in a subtle manner that only through depleting natural resources can you actually have a better standard of living. Now, again, with the question of ethical dilemma, how would a PR personnel deal with that?
I think it's a tough call. So my suggestion to PR practitioners would be, I'm sure before becoming a faculty member, I've also worked in an organization which was building dams, which was turning, the course of the rivers, which was blasting mountains, which was going deep down of the earth, and also felling trees. And then we would say that, okay, against the 2,000 trees which we are going to fell, we are going to, plant, say, 23 lakh trees. But then I could see, could call the bluff, because the trees which you are felling were probably 500 to 1,000 year old. And what you are planting would take thousands of years to, to reach that stage. So to that extent, I agree with you. But then it's up to the PR person to take a call whether you would like to work in that organization or not. If you don't smoke, you don't have to work in a company which, makes cigarettes. If you don't drink, don't work in a company which makes liquor.
So it's not too different from the profession of a lawyer.
Absolutely. It's a good question. Every profession has a certain genetic code. If, for example, the genetic code of a medical profession, to my mind, is healing. The genetic code of journalism is, to my mind, truth, objectivity. But you do find a lot of subjectivity in journalism also. The genetic code of a legal profession is advocacy. So to my mind, public relations cannot claim objectivity because they are paid communicators. They speak on behalf of an organization. At the most, they are advocates for that organization. Okay. But having said that, you cannot keep on telling lies presuming that people don't come to know. It doesn't happen, Prashant. So it is good for the companies, is good for the public relations people to aid and advise the managements to come with truth. If bad is bad enough, get it off your chest as soon as you can. But by camouflaging, whenever you have more than two persons knowing the truth would emerge. So why tell the lies?
It's all about not only clearing your image, but clearing up your act too.
If you go back to history, I think Hitler was probably the first person who understood the value of mass communication. But then, you know how erroneous his communication was. He believed that repeat a truth 10 times, it becomes a truth. And he believed that media was an instrument of social control. He did that, but where is he now? Even in our memories. So, mass media should not be used as a tool alone, but it should be used as a tool of truth also.
Absolutely, ma'am. And now, since you brought up journalists in between the question, why would journalists need PR? Can you please elaborate?
Okay. Public relations, Prashant, is a very important source of news for journalism. When I say public relations, it's not necessarily to be called public relations. To be called public relations, like for example, Prime Minister's office. When Prime Minister's office speaks, is a PR they are doing with the journalists. If a company has to proactively tell about a new product or new service, so they use media to reach out to their constituencies. So journalists would always need a spokesperson and a conduit in that company to build bridges with media house and that company. But having said that, if you are a very senior journalist, you need not go through the public relations officer. You might call the Prime Minister or the CEO directly. So there's a lesson for PR people. In order to be considered valuable, they should do a lot of homework themselves. I always say public relations person should, turn his own organization as a beat as a journalist does. He must know the A to Z of the corporation or the company he works for. So whenever a journalist calls you, you should be able to give him all the information. You should be able to be of help to him in organizing one-on-one interviews, organizing press conferences.
Yes, we are a diabolical lot.
Yes, and the journalist cannot avoid. You find that media generally thinks bad is good, good is not good. So for them, bad news is good news. But having said that, no journalist would avoid an official version of reality. They may not trust is a different matter. But a good journalist would always give both the perspectives, what he or she feels and the perspective of that company. If he's not doing it, he's not doing a good job.
Okay, so what kind of skills should our audience hone so that they could call the Prime Minister in the future?
You'll have to reach the stage of an editor to call the Prime Minister. But as you grow in your profession, it's very important for you to have a kind of 360-degree perspective, not only about communication per se, but about whatever is happening around. You should be a kind of, for example, let me just say it, crudely. You must know something of everything and everything of something. That everything of something is the organization you work on, and something of everything is environment, political, economic, social. Everything is which is happening around the world. A PR person must know, because he might be asked any question anytime. He cannot be dumb. Two, the most important thing for a PR person is to have sharp reflexes. Mm-hmm. In fact, you should have the capability of understanding or assimilating one thing 2 times in the same time a normal person understands once. Because this is true even of journalists. Anyone who's in communication, the ramifications could be very, very high. Once you say something, it's like, an arrow. Once it's out of the bow, you can do nothing about it. Then it is in the public domain. So it's very important on the part of the communicators to be very responsible, to be very articulate, to understand the ramification of that communication. So reflexes have to be extremely sharp. And these can always be learned and built over a period of time.
Now, that is a lesson our media needs to learn. Now, okay, so when it comes to PR skills, I mean, does it take precedence over how much you conduct yourself or how much knowledge you have over a subject?
Okay, I think both the things. The PR conduct and PR ethics, I think they are learned 2 ways. One is your own personal grooming as a human being. Mm-hmm. You don't learn ethics when you're 22 or 23. You stop learning ethics once you enter your teens. And family, your home is a cradle of civilization. The way you are as a child, the way you become as an adult. If you tell lies as a child, you won't stop telling lies as an adult. And they become lawyers later on. Absolutely. That gets reflected in your work also. And you don't realize you're telling lies or you're concocting facts. So one is your grooming as a person. Then there's a code of ethics brought in by the professional bodies, like in Indian context, Public Relations Society of India. It's almost a worldwide body in the International Public Relations Forums. So any PR person should, almost eat up, digest the Public Relations Code of Ethics. So whenever in trouble, just refer to the Public Relations Code of Ethics. 2 is your own personal behavior. For example, PR people are sometimes criticized for whining and dining. Whining and dining with the journalists or the people. Now, you wine and dine at homes also. There's nothing wrong per se. But then, as a PR person, if you start going beyond a point, you're making a fool of yourself. You're making a fool of yourself. So, if you are a host, you must always understand and remember that you're a host and you are hosting a press conference, you're hosting a party. So, don't get, drowned in liquor or cigarette. Is not a good thing at all. Not a good thing at all.
This host takes this lesson. Okay, now, coming to that. PR is believed to be a very kind of an informal profession because it involves a lot of social networking, right? So most of it occurs at luncheons, at parties. At least that's a general perception. Now, can you please clear the air on that?
Well, Prashant, I won't agree with that at all. Public relations is very important.
That was the general perception.
Yes, okay. It's a very, very important management discipline, communication discipline. And this perception, which you said, generally comes from the media. Unfortunately, they think that if your CEO is shown as sapling the plant, you get some brownie points. If you donate something in CSR, it's public relations. No, public relations has to be, I would say, the soul or the backbone of any organization. PR is nothing but communicating the voice of a company. And the voice of company cannot be different from the real voice of the company. You might concoct, you might, manipulate once. You can't manipulate all the time. And PR is not just media relations. Media relations only, to my mind, 10% of the total public relations. Employees are your very important constituent public. How do you interface with employees? How do you build bridges between management and employees is a very important public relations function. Shareholder, communication, shareholder relationships, again, a very important public relations function. So there's so many things, Media is only one part of PR. But generally, because media is manifest, we see it, we think that PR is nothing but all media relations, which is not true at all.
Okay. But coming to that again, PR happens to be in that perspective a very meticulous and strategic profession in that sense.
Yes.
So what goes on behind the doors, I suppose?
Okay. Before that, let me tell you what is expected of PR. Okay, the three things. One is that in case there's a negative public opinion, try to turn it into positive or neutralize it. If there's a positive opinion, retain it. If there's no opinion, articulate it. These are three things. So these three things gets articulated in PR leading, speeding up issues. If you would look at the Anna Hazare movement which happened only recently, this was very sporadic. I'm sure Mr. Anna Hazare never thought in his life that he'll get the kind of response he got. But his PR machinery was in full swing. There are a lot of people from the media who comprise the public relations machinery of Anna Hazare. And what were they trying to do? They were reaching out to the people through social media, through interactive media, through SMS, through mobile phones, through every media. And the mass media, the mainstream mass media also, because media is where the action is. So when all the OB-Vans went to the Ramlila ground and Jantar Mantar and all, obviously it creates a buzz, it creates a hype. And it became almost a nationwide movement. I think the government was, totally surprised. Nobody realized that could happen. And you also realize that a lot of people got into the fray. I remember Hero Honda, which had just launched a campaign, and this happened on 16th of August. And Hero Honda's campaign, Hum Mein Hai Hero, that also broke on that particular day. And immediately you found on the social networking sites that, all those who have Hero Honda, let's go on those motorbikes and support Anna Hazare.
So it was very meticulously timed.
I don't know whether it's meticulously timed. It just happened. It was of course 15th August, 16th August was a time. And then also using imagery, calling Quit India moment. Calling it, Anna Hazare, people start wearing caps and all those. Is it right or wrong? I'm not saying it. But then a lot of effort went into that. It did not become a movement just for nothing. Whether it's right or wrong in democracy is a different matter. We are not talking, it's not a subject of today's discussion. But then, it's not that it was not sporadic. People are working full time behind that. The moment you found somebody criticizing, and immediately there'll be 20, responses on the social networking site. It means somebody was even monitoring it. And here we find a lot of companies, they don't monitor what is written about them. So the lesson is that today mass media has a role, but social media, which is uncontrollable, which is not, it can happen from anywhere in the world. So you have to monitor and track that too, because public opinion can also be made through the social media. And especially when you want to reach out to the youth, youth have become really drivers of public opinion through the social media. I recall one of the coffee chains, I can even take the name, Cafe Coffee Day, has a kind of a mandate that they don't ask you for order. And I find a lot of youngsters, they do a lot of faltugiri, I'm sorry to say. They are sitting in all the air-conditioned Cafe Coffee Day, and they are doing their notes, they're chatting, they are opening their computers. So this happened probably in Chennai, I think a few months ago, and there were a lot of people waiting outside so that the seats were vacant and they could sit. Probably one of the guys from Cafe Coffee Day told those guys, is the order coming, sir, or whatever. And probably this particular gentleman, he posted on the website, on the social networking website, against Cafe Coffee Day. It almost became a moment. Cafe Coffee Day found itself in a huge image problem. And they went on writing saying, please tell us, sir, who was the person, we'd like to apologize, this was not a mandate, but this happened, this could be a standalone case. So sometimes you do find that the companies are in a very tricky situation. On the one hand, they're using social media to attract youth, but it's quite possible that adversaries may also be working against you. So it's a catch-22 situation, and PR can't really help, except that you have to bow to the public opinion.
And many times you yourself would find many phenomena which baffle industry experts and PR personnel alike.
Yes.
As you said, the Anna Hazare movement, even this Cafe Coffee Day movement.
Yes.
Okay, so that implies that PR is constantly evolving over the years.
Yes.
So how has it, can you please chart its growth?
Yes. Like for example, when it really started, maybe 100 years ago, 90 years ago, so it was basically called press agentry model, that you're only interfacing.
That's a mouthful.
You're only interfacing with the media. And this happened because of two things. One was the great economic depression of the 1930s. And after the First World War, between the First and the Second World War, the world completely changed. Most of PR and advertising are driven by technology. During that time, the radio was invented, the talkie came, the telephone came, the aircraft was invented, the newspaper, they evolved. It was an era of penny press. And there were some journalists, because, till that time, mass media wasn't there. So people really didn't know, there were nobody who was worried about the image. And when the great economic depression happened, and you found a lot of countries, the capitalist countries, also entered public sector. They entered business. So when they entered business, there was all of a sudden there was a competition between private sector, public sector. जैसे वो एक कहावत है, मेरी कमीज आपकी कमीज से सफ़ेद है, right? So everybody tried to say that I'm better than you are. And it was also a time when the media people, they started writing on the senior side of things also. What is wrong with church? What is wrong with politics? What is wrong with business? So when somebody is criticizing you, Prashant, you don't sit idle. You respond. That is when public relations was born. Okay. Articulating the voice of the company or the people. And they also saw that public relations through articulation was able to get a lot of good image. Rockefellers and all, they won elections because the first generation of PR people were journalists. In fact, Ivy Lee, who is considered the father of public relations, was a financial journalist. So he's the one who used the, you can say, the P's and Q's of public relations. It was not called even PR. I remember, I think in the state of Pennsylvania, there was a strike in a rail company. So this gentleman happened to know Mr. Ivy Lee, said, can you handle it? And Mr. Ivy Lee said, all right. And he understood, he thought, oh, there was a lot of, sense and truth in what the gentleman was saying, the head of the company. So he set up a office in that company, and he wrote, I don't remember exactly but he put a placard saying that what we speak is nothing but truth. You can check back the truth from anyone you want, and it's not a publicity bureau or an advertising bureau. It is a public relations or whatever information bureau which only speaks truth. and that strike was averted. And people saw the value of public relations. It was called public relations because you are interfacing with public. And in public relations parlance, media is also very important public. Most of the PR is done through media because you're reaching out to your constituencies.
Obviously.
The PR is also called third-party endorsement. You're not saying it. You're telling the media. Media is understanding your point of view and telling through their newspaper columns or news channel columns. So that becomes a third-party endorsement. Get my point? So public relations was born as a pro-choice of the countries to tell about their point of view. In fact, United States was the first country to set up an information department under, I think, John Creel, because USA joined the First World War at the fag end of the war, around 16 and 17. So they wanted to tell people per se why America entered the war. And the rest is history, as they say. Everybody, embraced PR and became teaching discipline in schools of journalism. Because to answer your question, which you asked me some time back, PR as a source of news. So every school of journalism also has a paper on public relations, because there cannot be any journalism unless until you understand how news is generated from the perspective of organizations.
So audience, these are the people who help the Rockefellers of the world make them millions.
Yes.
Okay, ma'am, what is corporate communication? That term seems to keep popping up again and again in
Yes.
this interview.
Prashant, corporate communication is not more than 20, 25 or 35 years old. There's a little story behind it. Some people say it's nothing but good old public relations. Some say that because times have changed, countries have changed, expectations have changed, so the PR has expanded to become corporate communication. So corporate communication is a sum total of communication that's generated by an organization, which also include marketing, communication, everything. So a little story in case we have the time is that when the Watergate scandal happened in America, so Nixon, who was the president, he used one line which was not liked by PR people. He said, a small PR mess up, we can fix it. It was not a PR mess up. It was a question of ethics, because they were bugging the phones of the opposition party. So PR, as I said in the beginning, cannot turn black into white. So from then onwards, there's a saying, there's a story that the PR people got wary of using the term public relations, so they started calling it corporate communication. But then corporate communication embraces more communication than traditionally PR has been able to embrace.
So it's developed more into a euphemism in that manner.
I won't say euphemism. Now you find that out of the 500 Fortune 500 countries, I think about 90% don't use the term PR. They call it corporate communication.
Okay, so what advice would you give to students who are aspiring to get into corporate communication? Because most of my friends, I mean, quite a lot of them believe that's where the money is.
That's where the money is, okay. Corporate communication, PR, is called the sunshine profession now. And thanks to liberalization in India, there are lots of multinationals, and public relations really has come of age from the 90s in India. And there are thousands of big, small, PR consultancies. They're all international PR consultants are in India, and the huge potential for youngsters to get into corporate communication, PR. But it's very important to be good at that. If you're not good at that, you're not there at all.
Okay. This was an enlightening session. Thank you so much, Dr. Jitwani.
My pleasure.